Welcome to the deep dive for this week. Don't forget to visit the website at deepdiveau.net. Check out our socials and Patreon page at the Deep Dive AU. Subscribe via your favourite podcast app or like and subscribe at our YouTube page at the Deep Dive AU.
This is the Deep Dive Podcast. And here is your host, Michael Coles.
We have our very first international guest on the Deep Dive. Jenn is a mother and entrepreneur and currently a YouTube content creator under the handle neurodivergent. She is also a late diagnosed autistic and ADHD woman who received her diagnosis at the age of 39 after the diagnosis of her son. Since then, she's been sharing her story on YouTube and social media to educate and to help others feel less alone. Jenn, welcome to the Deep Dive.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Michael.
So how did you get started with creating content on YouTube?
I'd always kind of wanted to start a YouTube channel. I think, I'm very much into like politics and stuff like that. And I think kind of as an autistic person, we are good at monologuing. And so it's funny because I've been hearing a lot of creators say lately that I'm not, you see a snippet of me, and that is because we're not having like two-way conversation. And so interestingly enough, I thought that, monologuing on YouTube would be kind of interesting. And I always knew that I was different, like my whole life. And when my son got diagnosed, I eventually found out that it was hereditary through a long string of events. And if people haven't checked out my introductory video or my YouTube channel, I would encourage them to do that. But essentially, my son was diagnosed and I thought it was just like happenstance. And then I found out that it was hereditary and I was like, oh my goodness, maybe this will explain why I felt different my whole life. And so I started looking into it and I realized that like, oh my gosh, like the first few videos I saw were very stereotypical, annoying, like, you've never had any friends, you can't understand sarcasm, and I was like, that's not me. But the further I got down the rabbit hole after I, overcame some of those hurdles, realizing that those were not signs of autism for everybody, and were more stereotypically, especially for like high masking individuals, I decided to seek out a diagnosis. And I think that for us, it's a very like, autism can become one of our special interests. Like a lot of people that are autistic, they'll have special interests, and one of them can be like psychology and people behavior. And so autism quickly became my special interest. And so that was kind of what I wanted to talk about. And mostly in the beginning, there was just a lot that I wanted to get off my chest. And it was a very like validating journey for me, but also like a discovery journey, right? Because I was finding things out about myself that I otherwise wouldn't have found out if I wouldn't have like taken the time to like sit down and write scripts and research it more and tell my own story. And just all these puzzle pieces, really started falling together. And so that's kind of what it was. It's like, I guess I felt like I wanted to start a YouTube channel in some respects, just because I knew that I had information that I wanted to share. But once autism made an appearance in my life, that very quickly became my special interest that I wanted to talk about. So here we are.
Fantastic. So what types of neurodiversity topics do you discuss on your website and YouTube channel?
So I cover the dual diagnosis of autism and ADHD, because I was originally diagnosed with ADHD many years ago, probably at least like a decade ago. And it made sense for a lot of areas of my life, but it didn't make sense for like every trait that I had. I definitely had the struggling with like paying attention when somebody was talking to me and, wanting to like say something when somebody else was talking because I had a thought and wanted to like kind of hang on to it. And I was definitely like always moving, like I joke around and say like I was like a little cricket in bed because my legs were always moving, even when I was trying to sleep. And my husband thought that I had, restless leg syndrome. And a lot of other, traits that fit the ADHD diagnosis, but then there were like a whole slew of traits that didn't fit the ADHD diagnosis, like, mostly like extreme introvertedness and exhaustion after every single social interaction. Man, this fly is just like, he wants to be on this podcast too. He wants to be a part of this. But I mean, he's got nothing to say. So, I also like had, struggled with making eye contact and was very reclusive and stuff like that. And so ADHD fit part of what I was experiencing in life, but definitely not all of it. And so once autism came onto my radar, it really did like fit everything. And at the time when I started my channel, I was like, there aren't a whole lot of creators out there that are talking about the dual diagnosis, or at least that's kind of what I thought. And I still think that's true to a certain extent, but I will say that there are a little bit more than I originally realized. But it's still not as common as people just talking about ADHD or just autism. And so I really try to get into the, like the difficulties with that comorbidity, which is like, sometimes they will mask traits of the other, but they also, and that would seem like, oh, well then, you kind of have an easier time getting along if, you're struggling less in some of the areas, but really I'm struggling with two different things, and so I've got strengths and weaknesses in both. And that's kind of what I try to discuss on my channel and give people an insight into or a glimpse into, if that makes sense.
Okay, so how does your YouTube content help raise awareness about neurodiversity and autism?
Well, I would venture to say, like, first of all, just kind of like talking about my own experience, which I have said from the beginning, that's the only thing that I can completely be an expert in, right? Is my own experience. Is that what autism and ADHD can quote unquote look like, especially for like a high masking individual, because there's a lot of, stereotypes that people believe about both conditions. And I think once you become an adult, especially, those traits will lessen quite a bit. And so people will, and again, it goes back to like higher masking individuals, it's even less apparent. And so, because you're not acting like a little kid anymore, but none of us are. Like, even if you're neurotypical, you're not like throwing the same fits if somebody took your toy. Like, you might still feel that anger inside if somebody like took your lunch out of the refrigerator at work, but you're not like getting on the floor and throwing a temper tantrum. Like, we all grow up and mature, and as adults, we definitely can hide or mask our traits a lot better. And so, number one, I wanted to show people how it can quote unquote look. And second, I just wanted other people to feel less alone, and so I was kind of hoping to reach out to other people. And I really try to be like idiosyncratic in some of the stuff that I talk about in regard to like the little tiny traits that maybe, people are like, oh my gosh, I do that too, and not just like being so general. And so I share a lot of my own story, which again may hit with some people, may not hit with other people. But if you've met one autistic, everybody has a different journey. Everybody has different, little idiosyncrasies or things that they struggle with, and they might relate to 50, 60, 70, 80% of what I talk about. But they're still going to feel less alone because they're seeing somebody else talking about some of these idiosyncratic things that they're like, oh my gosh, I do that too. Like, I feel that way too. I struggle with that thing too. So I guess it's partially, a mixture of education and trying to, build a community where people can feel like they're a little less alien.
Okay, so what are the common misconceptions about neurodiversity that you address in your videos?
So, um, I haven't done a whole ton of videos that really dig deep into that. But I think for starters, being a female on the spectrum is a different animal entirely. And so I do address a lot of that. And I do address, a lot of the unseen signs that come with being a high masking adult, including, I actually do pick up on, several social cues. And again, I have worked my whole life since I was like 16 years old. And I now have a family. And I actually own my own business for quite a while, which people with ADHD are a little bit more willing to take risks. And so they are more likely to, be entrepreneurs. And the entrepreneurial space needs us. But, I had my own successful business that I started. I had full-time employees. I, went to college. I got a degree. I did all these things that people on the outside would look at that and they would say, well, you can't possibly be autistic. And the truth of the matter is that like it looks a lot different from what you think it used to look like. So I think I try to kind of just show one way that autism can look like through my personal experiences. And I'm trying to think of like I said, I've been meaning to like dive into this topic for a while now. But again, I think one of the biggest issues is just kind of like how it can present or feel for high masking individuals is probably one of the biggest ones. And I think a lot of the misconceptions that people have nowadays is unfortunately due to the fact that we got rid of the Asperger's diagnosis with the 2013 rendition of the DSM-5, I believe. And
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
yeah, and now they just call everything autism. And so that's really difficult for a lot of people who have seen higher support needs children, especially little boys on the spectrum, and they see somebody who's nonverbal, and they are called autistic. And then you talk to somebody like me who has a family, owned businesses, worked since I was 16 years old, went to college, owned rental properties, and you're like, nope, you are not. You are not that. You are not the little nonverbal boy. And you're right. I'm not the nonverbal little boy. But unfortunately, they don't make a distinction anymore between lower support needs, not no support needs, but lower support needs adults to higher support needs kids.
Mm. And I think in my experience, I think it varies from day to day because I think sort of like, at a time you basically sort of had lower support needs and you basically don't need as much help as you do. But then you sort of like, have higher support needs at some stage when you basically have a meltdown or a shutdown. So how do you promote inclusivity and acceptance of neurodivergent individuals in your online community?
I mean, the greatest thing is honestly that they include me, to be honest with you, because I've never felt like accepted or included anywhere really in my life fully until I started this YouTube channel, and that has just been something else entirely. So, the people that are in my community are typically they find me because they themselves are neurodivergent, autistic, ADHD, whatever it is. And so they're already accepted and included. and hopefully they feel that when they listen to my channel. But I think honestly, the bigger thing is that like they accepted me and that I've actually felt accepted for the first time in my life.
Yeah, sounds fantastic. So, what other YouTubers have you collaborated with?
Oh my goodness. Well, I feel like you've seen a few. Um, Orion Kelly, just, he found me out of nowhere. I don't know how. But he reached out and interviewed me, and, he was already like talking to Claire from Woodshed Theory and Mom on the Spectrum. And I've done a collab with, all of those guys. And honestly, I'm proud to say that they've actually, all three of them, become very close to me, personal friends, um, which has been pretty crazy. That's been like a huge benefit from all of this. But I've also done a collab with Mike from Autistic AF. If there's
Mhm.
anybody out there who has not seen him, go check him out.
Yeah, so
Um,
this stands for autistic after 40,
yes,
which
correct.
is, I think that's what it stands for, I
Yes,
believe.
yes. Obviously, it's a play on acronym for
Yes, of course.
AF. Very clever. And he's doing really well. And then I've also collabed with Thomas Henley. And we kind of talked about, some of the issues with, which is a reoccurring theme because this is who I am, which is a quote unquote lower support needs autistic
Mm.
adult. So we kind of talked about that on his channel. And it's kind of crazy because I've literally been building some real life friendships out of this because a lot of the people that I collab with or that I talk to, they are autistic and they also have a YouTube channel, which is like two things that like can really connect you with someone. So that's been, I mean, even if I stopped my channel today and didn't do another video, that would be like a huge benefit of having started this is that I've made some real life friends.
Mm. Fantastic. So, what advice do you have for neurodivergent individuals navigating the world and navigating their part of what they are on the spectrum?
So, I would say that, like, getting a diagnosis doesn't make things suddenly peachy keen for you. It gives context and understanding, but it doesn't take away all the social awkwardness, the rejection, the pain and the hurt. And I'm not trying to sound, all doom and gloom, but you're still going to be struggling with the same things that you did pre-diagnosis. But you at least have an understanding that that's who you are and that you're not a bad person. Um, you were just born a certain way that was completely out of your control. And I think that even that baseline level of understanding and giving yourself a ton of grace at the very minimum is a huge beneficial factor. And then I think that from there, you can kind of begin to step up and accommodate your needs a little bit more, So since my diagnosis, I've been able to say no to social events a little bit more often, which has been great. And I've been able to tell a select few people, I haven't told everyone in my life. Honestly, a lot of people in my family don't even know that I have this YouTube channel. And that's because they've known me my whole life as somebody who has not been diagnosed. And so to throw this on them when I'm like 40 years old, a few of them would believe it. A few others may not, Um, but I think that you can just really begin to kind of even let other people in your life into your inner world so that they can understand you better. And, that might improve some relationships for you. You might have the ability to have people who maybe misunderstood you before realize that, hey, if I don't have a bunch of emotions on my face, that's not because I'm upset or angry. It's just because I have a flat affect, because I've got autism. Or if I was short or literal in my response to you, that's not because I'm a jerk. It's because I've got autism. Or, if I don't want to go hang out at a club with a DJ with you and I'd rather go to a coffee shop, it's not because I'm being picky or obstinate. It's because I have autism. And so you can begin to maybe repair some relationships or improve some relationships, but understand too that there will be some people who will, unfortunately, just from lack of understanding, think that you're using it as an excuse and think that you are quote unquote acting more autistic after you find out. And, just remember, plant the seeds with kindness with other people. And I think they will either come around or they weren't meant to be in your life if they don't come around. But it's not your responsibility to fully educate them or get them to see your side. So you might lose some relationships or friendships. And at the end of the day, find peace with that because they weren't meant to be in your life anyways. And, you get to live authentically you. And I would say I think one of the biggest issues faced by a lot of us high masking individuals especially would be that we push ourselves too hard. I recently was watching Orion's interview with a autistic Kiwi, and she said something that was really, really profound to me. And she said, I've been dealing with pushing myself my whole life, and because I can, and I did, I feel like, I can continue to do that, but I'm not going to be very happy and it's going to wear me out and stuff like that. And so just because you can push yourself and you've done it in the past, your whole life before you were diagnosed, doesn't mean that you should continue to do that. Just because you can doesn't mean that you should. We all still have room for personal growth and, doing amazing things in our lives, but you have to realize that you have an autistic brain, and so you are struggling more than neurotypical people. You are facing different challenges that people who don't have a neurodiverse brain just don't see. Life is magnified for us, I feel like, and a lot of things feel 10 times harder, simple tasks that would be easy breezy, lemon squeezy for a neurotypical are 10 times harder for us in a lot of respects. And so just recognizing that and be productive, do things that bring you joy, but don't hate yourself for not being neurotypical because you're not neurotypical. So that would be my advice. How'd I do?
So how do you advocate for better representation of neurodiverse individuals in media and society?
I haven't really gone into that sphere yet. I do think that there could be a lot of, educational videos that I could put out in regard to how autistic people are portrayed in media. And I think that we could do a better job of portraying how it can look in high masking individuals. But unfortunately, that's not scintillating TV. You've got things like Love on the Spectrum. And, I know there was one gal on there that was a little bit too neurotypical. Of course, she was a female, right? And they actually kicked her off the cast. She wasn't autistic enough acting, because they have to make a show. So there's a lot of room for improvement in media, but unfortunately, regular Joes like you and I that have a family and a job, and struggle internally in huge ways that maybe aren't made for cinema, probably aren't going to be making it to the big screen anytime soon. But it's something certainly that we could educate about in our videos and advocate for. But other than that, I think the next step I would like to take is maybe to educate teachers to watch out for signs of autism, especially in young girls and young women. And because a lot of times they are the first resource for a child to get a diagnosis. It was for my son, and which flipped our whole life upside down, changed my life forever. If it wouldn't have been for that teacher recognizing signs of autism in my son, I never would have known about myself ever. I would have just continued thinking I was a crappy person. So there's a lot of work to be done. And it's just hard because we're in that boring middle ground right now, as high masking adults, where it's not too exciting to talk about in the media. Maybe a documentary style video would be apropos, but it could be done, and it could be something that we advocate for. But for me personally, although I haven't taken these steps because I just kind of started my YouTube channel like a year ago, and I have so many big ideas that will probably never see the light of day, but I might start there with and I actually got invited to speak at my son's school last year, and I didn't make it, but he's starting school tomorrow. So maybe I'll talk to them about it again, and just, even talk to some of his peers and his students, because he's autistic too, and teach them kindness. When I was talking to his teacher, she was saying that one of her goals would be to have her students leave for the summer and come back a little bit kinder, than they were when they left, understanding how different people are and how they are still full of value and worth. And, so maybe I'll just change a few lives here and there, but none of us can conquer the entire world, nor is it any of our responsibility. If I can go and talk to a classroom, then I'll do that. And that might be very beneficial to even a few kids, which could make a ripple effect. So yeah, I haven't done a whole ton of advocacy work because I'm a mom and, an entrepreneur, and I'm still running businesses and trying to get videos out in my spare time. And I have a little bit of OCD and perfectionism, so it just makes everything a lot harder for me. But yeah, I do have plans to, start working with some of my son's teachers to kind of educate them about what some of the earlier signs of autism might look like in kids.
So what resources do you recommend for individuals looking to learn more about neurodiversity?
I think that Tony Atwood is a great resource for me personally, right? I know that we're all going to have, different people that speak to us differently. But I feel like Tony Atwood has kind of felt like a autism whisperer to me. I think he's got some great content. Sarah Hendricks is another great one. And then obviously listening to people that have the lived experience. We've got enough doctors and charities and parents of autistic kids out there that are trying to advocate for us. And really, there's no better person to listen to than somebody who is actually, living that experience and has lived that experience. Let's see, who else would I recommend? Trying to think. Obviously, there's all the current YouTubers out there that, a lot of us know, so I'm kind of trying to think outside of that box. I think, just to be a little bit more nuanced and not to repeat a bunch of the YouTubers that, a lot of people have already kind of talked about, I would say, Tony Atwood, Sarah Hendricks, and just listening to lived experiences.
So how do you engage with your audience via social media?
I will say that messages are overwhelming for me, right? So I'm still a small content creator. I'm still just under 11K, but I do already have a lot of people reaching out to me. And I also have a Discord channel, which I will plug because there are a lot of really cool people in there. We've got memes that we share and a general chat and, special interests that people are able to do forum style sharing that. But as far as social media goes, on my own personal Facebook, I don't talk about it a whole lot. Again, because there's a lot of people who've known me my whole life who may not fully understand. So that's a little bit more complicated. But on my Instagram page, I'm able to share some relatable memes and just kind of validate people who reach out to me. And there are people that reach out to me, and I think, unfortunately, one of these days I might have to let some of those messages go, as much as it's going to hurt me, because I totally am egalitarian relationship girl. I just feel like everybody is just the same as me and deserves to be heard and deserves to be talked to. But I am also autistic, and so messages really do kind of overwhelm me, so I get a lot of messages through emails and Instagram and on Discord, even though I enjoy it over there. But for now, I do my best to reply to people and let them know that, hey, you're not alone. I struggle with this issue too. And, maybe posting some educational memes here and there. But I just think the biggest thing is just kind of trying to build community, right? So we all just feel a little less alone.
Okay. So what impact have you had on the neurodivergent community since starting your channel?
I don't know. What impact have I had, Michael?
Lots of sort of views and all that type of thing. So I think it's been really essential that I've actually found you out. It's one of my sort of I think you've been one of my sort of inspirations for starting the channel.
I appreciate that. I've had a few people reach out to me and say similar things, and I think it's just because there's a lot of autistic YouTubers. We all have our different styles, but there's a lot out there that will not share their own personal stories in depth, as much in depth as I do, and you don't have to, right? You're not required to. You can still share your story without sharing embarrassing tics or issues you've had in the office that you used to work at, where you got left out of gatherings, or skin picking habits and stuff like that. I really have tried to bare my soul on my channel, and so I feel like maybe a lot of people resonate and gravitate towards that, because I'm not just trying to do the same old educational content that everybody else does. I try to provide a true glimpse into my life. And I just have to hope that that resonates with some people. And again, a large portion of that is the autistic community that, comes to my channel because they themselves have autism or ADHD. But I've actually found some neurotypical people that have commented on my videos that have gained a whole new understanding for their partners. Or I've seen people that, again, want to start sharing their own story and whatever medium they can. Could be art, could be blogging, it could be talking to one person, kind of like we were talking about earlier. And I've actually had some clinicians and doctors that have commented on my videos that have said that they've learned a lot from me and have been really, kind of taken aback to hear my own story. So I can't say that I've made as much of an impact as maybe somebody who's got a 6-figure channel, but again, any impact is impact, and there've been neurotypicals and autistic people alike that have said that they've gotten something out of me sharing my story, which I greatly appreciate. I appreciate that question. It's a good question. I would say first and foremost, just watching my videos, liking and subscribing is huge because that promotes me in the algorithm and allows more people to see one side of what autism and ADHD can look like. And I do have, like financially, I've got a members only channel, and a little bit of merch, but I've never really pushed those things too hard because this isn't my full-time job. I do this as a hobby. It's definitely a labor of love, that, I don't really earn anything from. If anything, maybe I've recouped some expenses, but that's not the point, right? It's more of a hobby for me for now, just to kind of connect and share. So I would venture to say that watching my videos and liking and subscribing is a huge way. And, even like going back and watching some of my earlier videos, because a lot of times people will see that, a video is like 1 year old and they're like, oh, that's outdated. Well, no, me sharing my origin story, my villain origin story is not outdated. You can still go and watch that even if it was a year ago. So go back and watch all of my content. I think that would be awesome. But that was a great question to ask. Thank you, Michael.
That's all right, not a problem. So last question I have to ask you in 30 seconds or less, or if you want to go over 30 seconds, that's just as fine. What one piece of advice would you give to somebody?
I would venture to say find joy in simplicity, as simple as that sounds. I think a lot of people that are listening to this live in, a westernized country, most likely. And I think that, there's a lot of commercialism and things that you see in the media that really just make you feel like lacking and wanting. And whether you've got autism, depression, no depression, neurotypical, neurodivergent, whatever you are, if you can just kind of like find some beauty in simplicity and contentment. I know that's a little bit generic, right? But like, I think contentment is such a huge thing when you realize like you're okay, you're doing all right. Be thankful for what you have. Maybe start every day with recognizing what you have, and simple things like clean water, food, and it can really just kind of like change your mind from a woe is me attitude. Because as autistic people, we have, and for me, autistic and ADHD, we have huge struggles. We absolutely have huge struggles. But I think there's a lot of beauty in just enjoying simplicity and being content, realizing that you have a lot and you're doing better than you think you are if you like choose to just stop and be thankful for a lot of things that maybe you didn't take into consideration before.
All right, sounds fantastic. Well, on that note, thank you very much, Jenn, for being our first international guest on the Deep Dive podcast. Hopefully we can get together at some stage a bit later on. We can sort of like catch up on what you're doing.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you so much for having me on, Michael. I appreciate it.
For more information, visit Jenn's YouTube page at neurodivergent or go to her website, www.neurodivergent.com. We'll see you next time.